And now let's jump into today's program. Our first speaker will be Michelle Moyer with the EPA Mid-Atlantic region, who will be going over the Clean School Bus program, which is currently open for applications. Next up, we'll have our panelists introduce themselves and their experience with electric school buses. We're thrilled to have Jim Beasley, Bethesda Depot Manager with Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, and Scott Davies, Director of Transportation at Loudoun County Public Schools in Virginia. Then we'll move on to a Q&A discussion moderated by Carolina Mion, one of my fellow leadership team volunteers at Mothers Out Front, Fairfax. Following that discussion, we'll hear from Jason Smith, Energy Services Program Manager at Appalachian Power, talking about their experience funding electric school buses and what to consider about contacting your utility to start the discussion on necessary infrastructure for charging. I'd like to give a special thank you to our co-hosts. We can go to the next slide here showing all the wonderful co-hosts. We have the US EPA, Mothers Out Front Fairfax, Virginia Clean Cities, Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action, Generation 180, Virginia Organizing, and Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. And we can jump to the next slide. Introducing myself, I'm Katie Henderson, and I'm a volunteer on the leadership team for Mothers Out Front Fairfax. We've been heavily involved in advocacy for electric school buses, and we also sit on the steering committee for the Alliance for Electric School Buses. I wanted to highlight here the Alliance website because there's some really great resources on their resources page of the website for one section for school districts, one section for community advocates, and one section for elected officials. So anyone on the call can feel free to use those resources. And if anyone is, it's a alliance of national nonprofits supporting the transition to electric school buses. So if any group on the call today is interested in joining, feel free to reach out to me. The vision of the Alliance is a zero-emission school bus fleet that will promote clean air for our children, advance our climate goals, and create good jobs. And with that, I will hand it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Katie. Can you hear me okay? Good. I want to thank Katie and all the others for helping coordinate and make this event happen. And if one of the co-hosts could just continue to let people into the waiting room, that would be fantastic while I'm presenting. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see the slides? Are you able to see the slides? Oh, perfect.
Yes,
okay.
We're all good.
Thanks, Katie. As she said, my name is Michelle Moyer. I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency out of the Philadelphia office. I'm going to just do a quick intro of some of our staff here. Kelsey Matola, she could share her screen or share her camera if she wants, and Sydney Stern. They're both part of the Clean School Bus program team here in Region 3. We also have Allison Riley. She provides technical assistance for us, and has a wealth of knowledge for technical expertise in this program. And then finally is Paula Kroll. She is our supervisor here in Region 3. So the bipartisan infrastructure law provides $5 billion over 5 years, so from 22 to 26, for the replacement of existing school buses with clean school buses and zero-emission school buses. The first funding opportunity under this program is the 2022 Clean School Bus Rebate Program, and that was released on May 20th and will be open through August 19th. Let me just move it so it's out of the way. There we go. Half of the $5 billion is dedicated for zero emission school buses, so approximately $500 million a year. And then the other half is for zero emission and clean school buses, so the other $500 million. And to put that into perspective, for fiscal year 21, the National Clean School Bus Rebate Program had $10 million nationally that it was awarded. So this is a huge allocation of funding, and that's why we're doing such a heavy advertising and outreach on this program. So there are some program limitations to this. No state shall receive more than 10% of the fiscal year state available funds. Pardon me, hold on one moment. Hold on one moment. My apologies, that's a first. School districts applying directly for the funds may only submit one application to replace up to 25 buses. Other eligible applicants may submit multiple applications, but each application must be for a bus serving a different school district. EPA will not fund multiple applications for bus replacements that will serve the same school district. So just a quick look at the timeline. As I said, the rebate application program is open from May 20th and closes August 19th. So just over a month away. In September, EPA will review the applications. In October, we will notify selected applicants of their status, whether or not you've been selected or if you're on the waiting list. So from October 2022 to April 2023, you will have that amount of time to submit the rebate request, or I'm sorry, the payment request form. And then the project deadline is October 2024. I'm not going to go over these in all too much detail because you can find more about them on the program or in the program guide, but there's 4 eligible applicants. One is the state and local government entities that are responsible for 1, providing bus service to 1 or more public school systems, or they purchase school buses. The second eligible applicant is the nonprofit school transportation associations. Then you have Indian tribes, tribal organizations, or tribally controlled schools. And last is the eligible contractors. Again, if you want more information about the eligible applicants, you can take a look at the program guide. I do want to make a note, private school fleets cannot apply directly for the funding under the 2022 Clean School Bus Rebates. However, any of the eligible applicants can partner with a private fleet that owns and operates the buses to replace buses that serve that school district under a contract. And I don't have time to go through this example today, but these slides will be shared with you. So you could take a look at this on how private bus fleets can apply for the funding, or I'm sorry, can partner with eligible applicants to apply for the funding. So you have heard, I'm sure you've heard a lot of talk or discussion about the prioritized applicants or the criteria. Bill allows EPA to prioritize certain applicants. Applicants that meet 1 or more of the prioritization criteria will be offered more funding per bus and receive preference in the selection process. These criteria include 3 of them. 1 is a high need school district and low income area. The second one is rural school districts, and the third is the tribal school districts. I don't have time to go into any of these in great detail, but they are outlined in the program guide. And again, you have to meet 1 of these criteria. You do not have to meet all 3 in order to be on the EPA prioritized funding list that's on our website. So the school bus replacement guidelines for the existing buses, they have to, buses eligible for replacement must be 2010 or older diesel powered school buses that will be scrapped if selected for funding. If a fleet has no eligible 2010 or older diesel school bus and is requesting zero emission school bus replacements, the fleet can either scrap a 2010 or older non-diesel internal combustion engine bus, or scrap, sell, or donate a 2011 or newer internal combustion engine bus. New replacement, or I think I skipped a slide. Oh, there we go. Buses eligible for replacement also must have a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,001 pounds or more, be operational at the time of the application, be owned by the fleet receiving the replacement bus, and have provided bus service to the school district for at least 3 days a week on average during the 2021-2022 school year at the time of applying for funds. The new replacement buses, they have to have a battery electric, CNG, or propane drivetrain, be certified EPA vehicle model year 2021 or newer, have a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,001 pounds or more. It cannot be ordered prior to receiving the official notification of selection for funding, and they have to be purchased. They can't be leased or leased to own. In addition, the new replacement buses must serve the school district listed on the application for at least 5 years from the date of delivery. They have to meet all federal safety standards according to the manufacturer's recommendations and state requirements. They do not include an unvented diesel passenger heater. They cannot be funded with other federal funds. And upon request, they have to be made available to EPA or our representatives for 5 years from the date of delivery. So the important information is the school bus funding. The maximum rebate amount per bus is dependent upon 3 things. Whether or not the school districts served by the buses meet one or more priority criteria that I outlined before. Number 2 is the bus fuel type, and number 3 is the bus size. So for example, in this slide, you could see if you have a priority criteria, or I'm sorry, a priority school district who wants to replace an electric vehicle with a class 7 or higher, they would be eligible for up to $375,000. Other applicants would be eligible for $250,000. And just to note, training, consulting, and warranty costs are additional eligible bus costs that are included in this funding here. Any funds in excess of the cost listed above are solely the responsibility of the applicant or the awardee. So the infrastructure side of the funding, school districts can receive up to $20,000 if they're priority school district, if they're replacing an electric vehicle class 3 or higher. Other eligible school districts would get $13,000 per bus. Just to note, infrastructure labor costs, including design and engineering or installation, are additional eligible infrastructure costs. So this is just a slide that talks about what is an eligible expense. EPA funding for infrastructure is limited to the fleet side of the meter, as shown on the right side of the diagram. All level 2 charging infrastructure purchased under this program must be EPA Energy Star certified chargers. And you'll hear more from a power company later, but we highly encourage you, if you're interested, to talk to your power company now. The application process, I'm not going to go into too much detail except to say, make sure that you have an active SAM.gov or system for award management, or SAM.gov entry registration, because that does take a bit of time to make sure that it's active and that you apply for one. We're going to post some Q&A documents online. The application is open and you can find it on our website. If you want to take a look at the questions that are out there now that are part of the application process, you can review the application user's guide that's on our website and is a link here in the PowerPoint presentation. It gives you step-by-step instructions on how to apply for the rebate. I don't have enough time to go into the selection and notification process, but I did include this in the slides for your benefit. And then lastly, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. So if you're thinking about applying or you need additional assistance, or you're not sure or you're not going to apply, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. So just put your name of your organization or yes, and with your response, yes, no, not sure, or need additional assistance. If you're not comfortable putting it in the chat, you could simply email one of us, which is here. You could email myself or Kelsey. And that concludes my slides. And I will turn it over to Carolina now, and she will lead the panel discussion and introduce the schools.
Thank you, Michelle. So we have 2 representatives from school districts that have agreed to join us today and talk about their experience with electric school buses. So I am pleased to introduce Mr. Jim Beasley, who is the Bethesda Depot Manager with Montgomery County Public Schools, and Mr. Scott Davies, who is the Director of Transportation for Loudoun County Public Schools. Thank you both so much for joining us today. So now we're going to take a few minutes for them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their county, their school bus fleets, their routes, and their experience so far with electric school buses. And then we're going to move into a couple of panel discussion questions. So Mr. Beasley, how about we start with you?
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, inviting us from Montgomery County. A little bit about us, Montgomery County, Maryland, about 500 square miles. I believe the number of students that we transport is somewhere in the range of 190,000. Right now, I'm sorry, 100,000, but the student population is about 190. We're broken down into 6 geographic depots. I'm at the Bethesda Depot, which is probably be the southwestern part of Montgomery County. And we have mostly suburban routes with very few rural routes. But we do have some depots that do service a goodly number of rural routes. The buses that we have were first pitched several years ago, but I didn't find out they were coming to Bethesda until December of 2020. And at that time, we were told that we were getting 25 buses, but they were going to put in an infrastructure for 45 buses. Now, over the next 4 years, I believe the contract calls for us to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 320 buses. For the next school year, we'll gain an additional 61 buses. You can see from the picture, the charging units. The bigger boxes actually feed 3 of the smaller boxes. So we have 15 big boxes and 45 of the smaller charging units. The buses that you see backed in, they're ready to go. The bus that you see pulled in on the right side of the screen, because of the location of the charging unit on the bus, we have to pull the buses in to charge because the charging cable is not long enough to reach it. The buses are being retrofitted as we speak to have the charging port to the rear of the right rear wheel. We have 3 buses that have been retrofitted. They work fine. The drivers back them in, plug them up, and they can top them off, get as much as they want, as little as they want right now. As we speak, they're developing the computerized charging side of it to meet the demands or meet the needs that we have here in Montgomery County. Now, the 25 buses are all stationed at Bethesda right now, but 4 of the depots are in the process of getting their charging units as we speak. The hope is that they'll all be operational by the first day of school. The 6th depot, because of the power that's needed for it, will be probably 1 more year. And then all of the depots will have their own small grid to charge the buses. We run, as I said, we have 25 buses. The last one was delivered maybe 6 weeks ago. And it's been in the state, but it was at the dealer to be used as a training bus for mechanics to train on as they transitioned into the electric buses. The buses came piecemeal. They started arriving here in November, December of 2021. The charging units were all completed and ready to go by the 1st of October of last year. And then the buses started arriving. As soon as I was told that we could put the buses on the road, we started training drivers to transition into an electric bus. And we started out with gathering data, which for all intents and purposes, we're still doing. I believe there's going to be a formal announcement coming within the next months, a couple of months, about what our plans are. But we've gathered an awful lot of data over here. We've had the buses on every conceivable route that they could run, AM, PMs, for those of you that are familiar with midday routes. We've used them on AM, midday, PM, and activity routes. We've used them on temporary student routes where we have a student that was living in Falls Church, Virginia. The bus would leave Bethesda, go to Falls Church, pick the student up, run the AM portion of their route, come back to the depot, park the bus, go back out, do the PM portion, and then take the student back to Falls Church, all on one charge. The driver was putting on 58 miles one way. So what's that, 116 miles round trip? He was returning with 18% of his charge. A couple of weeks ago, we sent a bus. It was supposed to be a 100-mile trip. The bus left and actually logged in 110 miles of high-speed driving. And there's a little bit of a difference between high speed and low speed. You use a little bit more electricity trying to maintain speed or accelerating as you do driving through neighborhoods in regen mode. So that bus did 110 miles and returned with 21% of their charge. Now that sounds like a lot. And for those that have dealt with electric buses in cold weather, they don't do as well in cold weather. They like the heat. They don't like the cold. They have to heat up. Electricity from the main batteries is used to heat the batteries and then used to cool the batteries in the wintertime. In the summertime, it's almost like they start out hot and they like it. They stay hot. And then in the wintertime, you also need electricity from the main batteries to heat the interior. The rule of thumb that we've come up with here is 1% per mile in the wintertime. And in the summertime, it could be as good as 0.6 or 0.7% of a charge per mile. So we do get a little bit more from that. We've had the buses out on field trips. I can monitor the buses using Zonar. And then as you can see on the charging panels, Highland Electric, they have a proprietary computerized system that I can also monitor. And that's being improved as we speak, things that we've asked for, such as the ability to only charge a bus up to a certain point and then move the charge on to another bus, to another bus. Each one of the big boxes that you see controls 3 chargers. Those charges, if all 3 were plugged in at the same time from that one box, they would only charge one bus at a time and then they would rotate. For those of you that are familiar with the charging curve, it charges real fast up to a certain point and then it slows down so it doesn't overheat the batteries. We want to be able to control that a little bit better because we found out even in the wintertime that the buses may not need a full charge to go back out in the afternoon. They may only need to be topped off up to a certain point, and then the charger can move on to the next bus. So it's just a matter of managing the charge is what we tell the drivers that they have to do. The drivers that are driving the buses, they are all volunteers and they'll come to us expressing an interest in driving the bus. And as soon as they take the bus out, they want the bus. The bus is fun to drive. I drove one this morning picking up students. It is a different way of driving. You learn a totally different way of driving. And the driver that took the bus on a 110-mile trip, she's probably the most experienced driver and has a very, very good feel of it. And driving the bus in regen mode and taking advantage of all of the little nice things that you pick up when you drive these buses, you actually save a little bit of the charge. And sometimes that little bit may be enough to get you back to the depot. The students love the bus. It's quiet, it's clean. They're air conditioned, they cool down nicely. The visibility inside is very nice. All of the buses that you see there in the screen have seat belts on them, all of the electric buses. We've had problems with them. Some of the problems are problems that you would normally get with a diesel bus where certain parts don't work. We've figured out ways to troubleshoot the bus and get it back in service a little bit quicker. Right now, of the 25, 6 of the buses are technically marked out of service, but 3 of them are at the dealer being retrofitted. So that leaves 3 buses. One has a power steering leak, which could happen in a diesel bus. One bus has the park brake, what wouldn't engage, but by rebooting the bus, it engaged. So it's over there being checked out, as well as getting a retrofitted charging adapter. And the 3rd bus, I can't remember what it is, but it's just a problem that we would have expected. There was a recall on the buses recently for a crimp on one of the power cables. We have 2 buses on the lot that are waiting to have that addressed. And then we have 1 bus that you can see a little further down that we just can't get the bus to energize. But it may be because the 12-volt system the battery is down so far that it just won't energize. In order to energize the bus, the 12 volts got to be up to energize the big battery. And then when you drive it, it charges up the system. There's 64 passenger buses and I like them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
You're
that
welcome.
thorough introduction. I'm excited to get into some more of these details in the panel questions, but I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Davies to talk about Loudoun County and their experience with electric school buses. So, Mr. Davies.
Great, thank you. Do you guys have the slides to pull up? Or do I need to share my screen?
We should have somebody that has your
Yes.
slide.
I'm working on it. One moment.
Well, right, my name is Scott Davies. I'm the Director of Transportation for Loudoun County Public Schools. And I've been in this job for a little over 2 years. I started a week before COVID hit, so that was fun. Next slide. So a little overview of Loudoun County. We have approximately 85,000 students. Much like Montgomery County to our north, we are also a suburb of Washington, D.C. So we have a good mix of the majority of our county is, the majority of our students live in the suburban areas, suburban routes. And then we have I would say the western half of the county is rural. However, only a small portion of our students actually live out there. So we have one area that has mostly rural routes. 560 bus drivers, 155 bus attendants, 515 bus routes, and 750 buses total. And we have a mixed fleet of Thomas International and Bluebird diesel buses. And then and I'll talk more about the electric buses that we have currently. Unlike Montgomery, we have the majority of our buses park at school sites. So we have our central garage that has a couple hundred buses that park here, a satellite garage, and then the majority of our buses park at 33 school-based parking locations. We have 7, which are mostly high schools, a few middle schools, and then a handful of elementary schools where we park. We have 17 high schools, 17 middle, and 51 elementary. Next slide. So phase 1, that was done in partnership with Dominion Energy. Dominion back in 2020 pushed out a grant program that they funded to start what they wanted to do was vehicle to grid. And they saw these buses as energy storage locations, and they saw good partnership with school districts to implement that. And so they did 50 buses initially. And we got 5 of those 50 buses across Virginia. And so there are 77 passenger buses that are based in Sterling. And we only paid the base cost of a diesel bus, of a 77 passenger Thomas diesel bus. And they paid the premium for the electric version of that, as well as the charging equipment and the installation costs. So it was, I viewed that as a very big win-win. Because it really didn't cost us anything other than the cost of the base we would have otherwise spent for a yellow bus. And we've had them in service for a little over a year now. Those buses have worked relatively well. Initially we had issues with the charging stations. They're vehicle to grid, and we have 3 charging stations and 3 chargers, and then 5 dispensers. So much like Jim was describing, the charger feeds 2 different dispensers and they alternate. They cannot operate simultaneously. So with the DC fast charger, it takes about 3 hours to charge a bus from empty to fully charged. And so if you have 2 buses plugged in, it'll be about 6 hours if they're both fully depleted. That never happens. There's always, 15-20% charge left. And we don't need them always to go up to 90% or to 100%. We can operate the buses at a lower percentage. We've generally kept the buses on a regular on routes that are close to the schools where they park. However, I did take a bus a couple weeks ago, and it was fully charged. Drove all the way down to simulated a field trip drove all the way down to DC, drove around the mall a couple of times, also down to Potomac Park where our drivers would park while they're waiting for the students to go through museums and such, and drove back. That round trip was about 75 miles, and that used 50% of the charge. So I thought that was pretty good. And as Jim stated, they like the heat. I don't think I would have gotten near that efficiency if we were doing, if this was done in the winter. Next slide. So our next plan is, so phase 2 was partially funded by a grant through the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. They did 2 rounds this past year. The first round we were awarded 6 buses, and because we're a mixed fleet and because we're doing a pilot program, we wanted to test out all the different brands that are on the market right now that are consistent with the brands that we operate here, which are Thomas, Icy, and Bluebird. So we ordered 6 of the Bluebird Type Ds, higher capacity, 81 passenger capacity, and we're going to park them down in the south part of the county where we have the densest ridership, and we're going to be using AC level 2 chargers rather than the vehicle to grid chargers. The AC level 2, obviously a little bit slower. It's going to take about 6 to 8 hours to fully charge the bus from 0 to 100%. But we feel that given the route distances, the efficiency of the batteries, and and all of that we think that will, with each bus starting 100% at the beginning of every morning, that should be more than enough. And those chargers are about $5,000 a piece versus about $45,000 a piece for the vehicle to grid DC fast chargers. So since we were limited on the funds that we got from DEQ, we made that decision to go with the less expensive charging system. And we're expecting those buses to be delivered in September, and we'll be putting them into operation shortly thereafter. So it'll be after school starts, but before the winter break. And going back to the previous slide about the 5 buses that we have in operation, as I mentioned, we had a lot of issues with the charging stations early on. And those have primarily been worked out now because these are so complex, I think, and it was pretty new technology. We obviously were expecting to have issues, and then those issues kind of translated to the bus with not so much the propulsion system itself failing, but the auxiliary systems, primarily like the compressor, the air compressor for brakes and things like that. Those, because it's not operating like a city transit bus, moisture would build up more frequently and cause it to fail. So those were some of the issues that we saw with the buses, and the manufacturer has been very good at providing warranty repairs and things like that and taking care of those. And so far we haven't had any further issues, and they've been very responsive. I got to say, much like Jim said, I love driving them. Super quiet. They warm up and they cool off very quickly compared to a diesel, and just a really pleasure to drive. And if you get used to the one pedal driving, you can make it much more efficient for battery consumption and overall efficiency. Next slide. So our 3rd phase, also funded by a 2nd round of Virginia DEQ grant funding. We're going to be implementing 10 buses, 5 more of the Type D Bluebirds, and then 5 of the long-range IC buses. And those long-range buses are going to be placed out in our more rural area of the county, at one of our schools. And we're going to be installing charging stations there, same level 2 chargers. And we're excited to see how those operate in the rural environment. So our goal with this pilot program is to really look at how buses operate in each of the different operational areas of the county, and the different types of chargers before we make a long-term commitment of investment, and we'll be able to make those decisions much more informed. Next slide. So some of the challenges we face is arriving to an uncharged bus. So if the charging stations go offline for some reason, if there's a power outage overnight, you have the potential to arrive at the parking location, the bus isn't charged, and you need to have a spare. So having a diesel spare, you need to have that ready to go. A limited range. I think the more we exercise these buses, the more we stress test them and get comfortable with the range, and especially the winter range versus the summer range. That will that range anxiety will go away. Like we mentioned, the reduced range for the winter, and then staff training. It's been interesting. We've trained the majority of our drivers in the east where these buses are currently parked on how to operate them. So that's been fun. Most of the drivers that have gotten on the electric buses love them. They're quiet, they're fun to drive, they're responsive. They have a lot more torque than your standard diesel. And I will say that the students don't particularly care for them. They you know, with it being so quiet, you can hear everything on the bus. So the cameras and the microphones hear everything that's said. So that's been interesting that I would not have suspected, but understand now after hearing that. And then limited flexibility. So field trips and emergency evacuation. Our buses are part of the emergency evacuation plan for DC. So we see that could be a challenge if we were to completely flip to electric buses. How would those operate in a major emergency where we have to evacuate the metropolitan area? That could be a problem. Next slide. So obviously fuel savings, especially in the current environment. I'm kind of wishing we had more electric buses right now, considering what we're paying for diesel and what we're likely going to be paying next year, although it is going down. Zero emissions. One of the things we did a presentation for one of our local congresswomen, and we had 3 buses parked next to each other, an older diesel, a newer diesel, and electric. They were all Thomases, and dirty tailpipe, clean tailpipe, and no tailpipe. It was that, and you can just see the progression of technology, and I think this is definitely the wave of the future. Obviously, quiet and pleasurable to drive, instant torque, which I talked about, and fewer moving parts. There is maintenance. It's not maintenance free, and compared to a diesel, but in fact, we're seeing. Obviously, this is still brand new technology, so I expect us to have more issues with these buses, but and to date, we've seen basically the 2020 diesel buses that we got at the same time as these 2020 electric buses. They still had the same number of work orders that popped up, just for different issues. And generally for the electric buses, it wasn't for the main propulsion system, it was for other auxiliary systems. And so I think as those things get worked out, we will see the maintenance and repair costs go down on those electric buses, just because of the simplicity of it and the reduced moving parts. But it's an assumption at this point, not based in fact. So next slide. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a very thorough and detailed overview from both of you. Thank you. We had a couple of questions just wanted to ask. You both touched a lot on, what the benefits are, what some of the issues that you have encountered. So if you could say, what has been just in general, the biggest lessons learned that can be applied, to others, to the future, or to other school districts that are going to be going through this transition, what would you say they are? And Mr. Davies, I'll start with you, and I'd love to hear from Mr. Beasley as well.
I would say start small, start with a pilot program. I think because it is, you don't want to launch massive change on folks. And I think we've learned a lot just with a little bit of a few buses that we've had so far. And I'm looking forward to growing that over the next year, but starting small and implementing that change over kind of a spoon feeding it versus trying to push it all at once is wise. I would recommend.
Great, thank you. Mr. Beasley, would love to hear your thoughts on lessons learned for Montgomery County and how those can be applied.
I would agree with starting small. I was not part of that conversation as to numbers. We have 1,200 routes in Montgomery County, so 25 buses is, we purchased one for each one of the 25 clusters. You can't do it alone. If you buy the electric buses and think you can go alone, you can't do it alone. As you saw in the slide with Montgomery Highland Electric, Highland is our partner and we work with them, and they have smoothed the path for us quite a bit. Our buses, outside of getting the charges initially started and running to proof them out to make sure that the buses would work with them, that was a bit of a chore, but we didn't have the buses yet. So start small and partner up and ask questions.
Awesome, thank you. I know we have a few more questions in the chat, and we're gonna have some of those questions be asked a little bit later in the Q&A portion. So for the sake of time, I'll turn it over now to Mr. Jason Smith from Appalachian Power, who is going to talk about how they as a power company can support school districts in the infrastructure setup.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us to your meeting today. As you said, my name is Jason Smith. I'm the Energy Services Program Manager for Appalachian Power, and also act as the EV lead for the Virginia portion of APCO. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Just to give you a little background information about Appalachian Power, we serve a little over 1 million customers in Virginia, West Virginia, and Tennessee. We maintain about 60,000 miles, I think it's a little over 60,000 miles of both distribution and transmission lines. So if you put that in perspective, you think about driving cross country from Virginia to California and back 10 times and taking a different route each trip. It just gives you a little bit better perspective of how many line miles that we have to maintain. But most of our service territory is very rural. These thunderstorms we've had these past few weeks have really been giving us a lot of trouble. They've kept the linemen or foresters very busy out there trying to cut the trees and just keep the power on. So I say all that because today is actually National Line Worker Appreciation Day. So if you know a line worker, you may want to reach out to them, just thank them for what they do to be sure that we have power so we can charge these electric school buses, so we can have these Zoom meetings and just carry on with their day-to-day work. Appalachian Power, we're customer driven. We have a great customer service group that consists of our customer service reps, our account managers, our external affairs managers. All of them, they're available to work with our customers one-on-one and just discuss the electrical needs once you start looking into getting these electric school buses and the EV charging, whatever it may take for us, the infrastructure on our end to get the power to take care of that charging. Next slide, please. Last year, we started providing grants to help offset the purchase of electric school buses versus a diesel bus. The photo you see right here, this is one of 2 electric school buses that was purchased by the Washington County School Board in Washington County, Virginia. These are manufactured by Bluebird. So far, last year in 2021, we awarded a little over $2 million in grants to 5 different school systems to assist in the purchase of 9 electric school buses. And again, the grants, they usually average around $250,000 because that's about what the average price is to help offset the cost of an electric bus versus a diesel bus. Again, this is one of the Bluebird buses. I think the other schools, they all went with the Thomas built buses, which are manufactured down in High Point, North Carolina, and sold by Sonny Merriman up near Lynchburg, Virginia. Next slide, please. Well, like I mentioned earlier, every school system in our, let's see, I'm on the right one. This year, this is discussing the continuation of the funding. This year, we don't have quite as much funding available for the grants, but we have already approved 2 applications for the purchase of 4 more electric school buses. And this is showing another photo of the Washington County School Board's bus. This was from the ribbon cutting ceremony they had during their media day event. Next slide. All right. Well, like I mentioned earlier, every school system in their service territory, they have a dedicated account manager. Matter of fact, that's a role that I used to have before I took over as the current position I've got. But the account manager, they can help assist with the projects like the addition of the electric school buses and the EV chargers. They typically work closely with the maintenance directors or the school superintendents that are over the schools in your area. So if you don't know who your account manager is, you may want to reach out to the maintenance directors, the transportation directors, school superintendents, and just, ask them if they have an account manager with a utility they typically work with. The sales reps for the EV buses, they also are very helpful to help determine how many chargers you'll need for the new electric buses and what sizes they will be. Next slide. Some questions that I would recommend you start thinking about before you speak with your local account manager. They're primarily focused around the EV chargers and how much power that you're going to require, either in amps or kilowatts. You're going to need to know the voltage of the EV chargers and whether you're going to need single phase or 3-phase power. You need to think about where you want to park the buses so they can charge. Will the chargers, will they get their power from an existing power source, or is it going to take a new dedicated service? If it takes a new dedicated service, do you prefer overhead or underground? You need to also think about your future needs and size your electric facility so they'll accommodate any of the future loads you may have as far as additional chargers. I think Mr. Davies referenced it in slide 4 or 5 of his presentation, but if you saw there, they had some rough end. They had accounted for, I think, 10 chargers at one location, maybe 5 chargers at another location. But these are things you want to think about. Something as simple as going ahead and installing some extra conduit in the ditch for an underground service, or increasing the size of your electrical panel early on. These are things that might help you save a lot of time and a lot of money down the road from having to go back and do upgrades. Another thing that'll help keep your costs down is by choosing a location for your chargers that's in close proximity to existing utility lines. If you are going to require 3-phase power, look over your site, see if you've got 3-phase power close by to where you want to put the chargers. All these things can help kind of reduce the make-ready work and also, in turn, reduce the upfront costs you'll have to pay to get the power to these sites. But we look forward to working with you all. And, it's exciting times adding all these electric buses to your fleet. I hope everyone has great success with these. If there's anything we can do as a utility to help make these as successful as possible, just let us know and we'll do what we can to help you out. But that's all I've got for right now, unless anyone has any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that information. So I know there have been some questions that have popped up in the chat. And if you have a question, now would be a great time for you to enter a question either for EPA or our panelists or for Appalachian Power. So Bailey and Sydney are, taking notes of those questions. So I'll turn it over to them to see what questions we can go ahead and ask.
Okay, so some of the questions, Scott has been answering them in the chat as well, but in case someone has missed it, one of the first questions are if you're considering using vehicle to grid, and also how long is a typical route?
So for LCPS, we are not considering using vehicle to grid beyond what we've done already with Dominion Energy. We have those 5 chargers that they installed for the 5 buses in Sterling, and so far they have not activated that functionality yet. But because of the cost and complexity of the charging stations, we are not going to be doing that, at least at this time. And as I mentioned, we're doing just basic level 2 AC level 2 chargers for our round 2 or our phase 2 and phase 3 pilot program. So once we gather all that data after all 3 of these phases have been implemented, we may alter course, but at this point we are not.
For Montgomery, it's been talked about. I'm not that deep into that conversation, but what I've heard is that the technology is not there. And one of the questions that I would ask, and it's probably a very simple thing that I'm overlooking, is that the buses have to be left on, the 12 volts have to be left on to charge the bus for the bus to talk to anything. If we turn the 12 volts off to save the 12 volt system, the bus is completely shut down. So I don't know whether they can override that. And our typical routes are 20 to 25 miles, regular red routes for the AM and about the same for the PM.
Okay, so another question that could be beneficial for everyone is, with the eBus premium chargers, who maintains them for your school districts?
For LCPS, for those 5 chargers, we purchased the bus and the charging systems through Sunny Merriman, which is our Thomas Built Bus dealer, and that was also partially funded by the Dominion Energy grant as well. So that they are maintaining those chargers. So when we have a system failure, we call Sunny Merriman, the dealer, to come and make those repairs.
For Montgomery, as you can see on the chargers, Highland Electric, we're partnering with Highland. Power Electronics is the company that installed the power grid. So any problems that we have, we would go back to Highland, and they in turn would go to Power Electric.
Okay, and then this question is for Appalachian Power. And Appalachian Power looked into doing any vehicle to grid arrangements with the schools?
At this time, we have not. It is still kind of early on for the vehicle to grid. It does add a lot of complexity to the process, the metering and the charging, just everything involved. So we have not at this time. I'm not saying we won't do it in the future, but we're just still kind of holding off to see how that works out. And, you know, a couple of years down the road, we may be interested, but no, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then this question is for both school districts. It's, who is your biggest partner in making your projects a success?
For LCPS right now, for the phase 2 and phase 3, since we're doing it internally, our facilities and construction people are our biggest partners, as well as the manufacturers that are providing the buses. Those are all the key people that are making, that are helping us put this in, implementing this.
For Montgomery, it would be Highland Electric and the construction people. Highland is the people that we go to as far as the grid goes, and as far as any computer problems or charging problems go. And then, of course, you have the distributor and Thomas Bus to work with them if there's getting mechanics trained up and making sure that everybody understands how to maintain the buses.
And then we have another new question. How does the price of an electric school bus compare to diesel?
It's about 3 times. So diesel cost is about a third of an electric bus. So that $250,000 premium that the EPA grant is providing. It's pretty consistent with what we've gotten through DEQ and Virginia DEQ and Dominion Energy. That allows you to actually buy the bus plus the additional cost of the infrastructure. One of the things I will say I didn't cover in my slides, though, when we submitted our grant application for DEQ, we estimated X dollars for construction and for the purchase of the charging units and the construction cost to install it all. And then we didn't get the award, and for several months later, in that time, the cost had significantly increased. So we had to figure out how to cover those additional costs. So that's something to consider as you're putting together your applications, making sure that you've estimated correctly.
Okay, and then we have another question for Loudoun County. What type of level 2 chargers did you install for your electric buses?
These are going to be a Blink brand electric chargers, and mainly the reason we chose that particular one was they had the ability to lock out. So because most of our sites are unsecured, they're in school bus loops and things like that. We don't want people just pulling up and plugging their car into it overnight. So we wanted to make sure we had remote access to so that we had card swipes. So when a driver comes up to plug their bus in, they swipe the card to activate the system. And we also wanted to have that network capability so we can monitor the charging and control the charging. And they provided that.
Okay, and then the next question is what were some of the initial key arguments to have the local government authorities get engaged in this transformation?
Well, for Loudoun County, obviously we have our school board passed early on a resolution that was really focused on environmental sustainability. And so that was not just transportation, although transportation has a huge carbon footprint that affected facilities. And so there are other building upgrades and things like that. But taking that resolution, taking that direction from our school board, and then with the opportunities that Dominion Energy and DEQ and now EPA has presented, how could we not take advantage of that to help further those goals that have been set by our school board? So that's what we've done. I think that's been the right approach for us. I wouldn't say that's the right approach for everybody, but for our unique situation, we wanted to take advantage of those resources as they're presented, and begin that change. I think trying to do this massively, first of all, our fleet is 750 buses. We purchase about 60 buses a year, and to try and buy 60 electric buses that at current costs, that would not be, plus the infrastructure costs on top of that. We would not be able to do that without the partnership of EPA and DEQ and Dominion Energy and others. So that's been a big help.
All right, and I just want to be mindful of time here. We're at 2 p.m. If there are any pressing questions, we could probably stay on for a few more minutes, but I did want to have Kelsey pull up that slide to just thank our co-hosts again. And then we also wanted to flag that there is another webinar tomorrow, I think. Yeah, Deborah just put it in the chat. There's another webinar from Dominion about how they are supporting schools, and I'll let her speak to that for a second.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Dominion Energy, they're providing solutions to help school districts receive funding as well to help you coordinate with the grid upgrades. They're offering maintenance, 15 years and extra funding to assist with the infrastructure. So at 9 a.m., they have a webinar tomorrow specifically if your district is, served by Dominion. So I put that in the chat, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But I'm with the Energy Foundation.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This has been fantastic. I've learned a lot personally. Thank you to all of our speakers and our co-hosts and moderators. This has been a great session. And if anyone has any questions that they think of after this session, feel free to reach out and we can follow up by email. And thank you. And everyone have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Katie.